The air smelled of pine and river mist, the autumn forest, alive with rustling leaves that painted the horizon in deep shades of gold and crimson. And through that rugged wilderness ran a narrow gorge, carved by centuries of relentless water, its foaming currents roaring far below like a beast chained to the earth. And across that gorge stretched a bridge, if it could still be called a bridge, little more than weathered, planks bound together by fraying ropes, swaying in the wind as though it too feared the river beneath. Yet it was the only way forward, and on that bridge, gripping the handrails with knuckles white, walked Evelyn Carter, a woman whose heart had known both the quiet lull of ranch life and the thunder of danger, too close for comfort, her chest rising fast with every creak beneath her boots, her eyes darting to the chasm where jagged rocks waited, cold and unforgiving, should her courage falter. And though she told herself to keep steady, though she whispered beneath her breath that she had crossed worse paths before, in truth, her mind screamed with every step that the ropes were splitting, the wood was rotting, and she was alone, until fate sent a storm in the form of splintering sound, the snap of hemp fibers tearing, under strain, sharp and sudden, the kind of sound that empties a soul of breath. And in that instant, her world lurched sideways, the bridge jerking violently, one side dipping, the boards beneath her feet giving way into open air, and her scream rose into the wind as her hands clutched at nothing but broken rope. Her body pitched toward the void, her life narrowed to a heartbeat away from the crush of water and stone, when a voice cut through the chaos, deep, commanding, steady as steel. "Hold on to me!" And before her wide eyes could comprehend, he was there, a shadow leaping from the opposite side, boots hitting the shuddering planks with the grace of a predator and the weight of a savior, his leather duster whipping behind him, hat clamped low over eyes that blazed with grit, a revolver at his hip and a scar across his jaw that told of battles survived. And Evelyn, trembling, caught in terror's grip, felt his arm seize her waist with the certainty of a man who did not doubt, not even against death itself. His chest pressed to hers as he pulled her close, his words again fierce and steady. "I'll carry you." And though the bridge tore apart around them, though the ropes twanged like snapping gunfire and boards dropped into the white fury below, she clung to him, her fingers digging into the rough fabric of his shirt, her hair whipping across her face, her lungs burning with the cold spray of the river. Yet in his grip there was no room for despair, only the raw force of a man who had chosen, without hesitation, to leap into another's fight, to bear her weight as though it were his own burden. And together they staggered across the breaking span, his boots slamming onto the last fragments of timber, each step a gamble, against gravity, until the final rope split with a sound like thunder, and suddenly they were no longer walking but falling, the two of them swinging wildly as the bridge collapsed into ruin, their bodies thrown toward the chasm's heart. And still he held her, muscles straining, eyes locked on the cliffside as one hand shot upward to seize a trailing cable, his fingers latching onto the coarse hemp even as it tore into his flesh, blood streaking his knuckles, the weight of both bodies hanging from that single grip. And Evelyn gasped, her arms locked around his neck, tears stinging her eyes as she realized she was alive only because this stranger, this cowboy who had come like thunder, refused to let her go. And there they dangled above the wrath of the river. The world shrunk to the groan of rope, the pounding of hearts, and the unspoken bond forged in the instant between life and death, a bond that neither yet understood but both already felt deep in their bones. And with the wind screaming past and the cliff looming above, he met her gaze, voice low, unyielding, a promise carried on the edge of survival. "I've got you, darling. Don't you dare let go." The roar of the river below thundered like an unending drum, its spray reaching them as icy mist while they dangled in the balance of fate, one fraying rope strand between survival and the unforgiving pull of death. And as Evelyn's breath came in sharp, frantic bursts, her wide eyes fixed on the cowboy's grim face, she realized that his grip on the rope was not just strong, it was defiant, the kind of strength that seemed born of fire, trial and pain, his knuckles shredded and bleeding yet unyielding, his jaw clenched as if he were ready to wrestle the very gorge into submission. And she clung tighter, her fingers buried into the fabric of his vest, feeling the rise and fall of his chest, steady despite the chaos, as though he had faced death before and learned not to bow. And in that suspended moment she found herself whispering words that trembled, from her lips half prayer, half confession, "Don't let me go." And his answer came like iron, low and certain, words weighted with a promise that felt larger than life. Not while I'm breathing. With a grunt of raw determination, he began to climb, one arm hauling both their bodies upward, every muscle straining against the weight of the world, his boots scraping against the cliffside, searching for any purchase. And Evelyn, though consumed by terror, lifted her head and tried to help, her hands reaching upward, clumsy yet desperate, her own fear bending into courage as she realized that survival demanded more than clinging. It demanded trust, and step by step, inch by inch, he pulled them closer to the ledge, every motion a war between gravity and grit, until at last his fingers found the jagged edge of stone, and with one final roar of effort, he heaved them onto solid ground, both collapsing in a tangle of limbs, dust, and ragged breaths, the gorge behind them swallowing what remained of the bridge in a thunderous crash of splintering wood, leaving only silence broken by the relentless churn of the river below. For a long moment neither moved, their chests rising and falling in sync, sweat and blood mingling. The world narrowed to the sound of survival. And when Evelyn finally turned her head, her golden hair spilling across the earth, she found his eyes on her, piercing yet softened by something she could not name. And she realized she had never seen a man look at her not with desire, not with judgment, but with the raw honesty of someone who had carried her life in his hands and found it worth saving. She opened her mouth, words tangled in her throat, but he beat her to them, his voice rough yet warm. "You're safe now." And though his body bore the marks of the fight, his tone carried no complaint, no regret, only certainty, as if saving her had been his calling long before that bridge had broken. Slowly she sat up, brushing dust from her skirt, her hands trembling not from weakness, but from the storm of realization that coursed through her. And she asked him, her voice a mixture of gratitude and curiosity, "Why? Why would you risk everything for me?" For a moment his gaze drifted toward the horizon, where the sun was breaking through clouds in rays of fire and gold. And in that pause she sensed the weight of a man who carried stories carved deep in scars and silence. And then he answered simply, almost too simply for the magnitude of what had just passed. "Because leaving you behind wasn't an option." His words hung between them, not just an explanation but a vow. And Evelyn felt something stir in her chest, a warmth that had nothing to do with the morning sun, something both terrifying and exhilarating, as if the world had shifted its course in the span of a heartbeat. Together they rose, his hand offering hers, strong and steady, and though she hesitated, pride battling gratitude, she took it, feeling the rough calluses that spoke of years of hard labor and harder choices. And when he pulled her to her feet, she found herself steadier than she thought possible, as though his strength had poured into her veins. The forest around them stood silent witness, autumn leaves swirling in the breeze, the gorge a reminder of how close they had come to loss. And Evelyn realized that this was not the end of a danger, survived, but the beginning of something larger, a path that fate had drawn for them both. She studied him as they began to walk away from the shattered bridge, his broad shoulders carrying more than just the weight of the pack on his back. And though his silence spoke volumes, she wanted to know his name, to carve into memory the man who had refused to let her fall. "Who are you?" she asked softly, and for a long moment he did not answer, his eyes scanning the tree line as though expecting threats hidden in the brush, until finally he glanced at her, a faint curve tugging at the corner of his lips. Not quite a smile, but close enough to spark heat in her chest. Just a cowboy passing through. She wanted to press, to unravel the mystery wrapped in leather and grit, but she knew the time would come. And for now it was enough that he walked beside her, alive, unbroken, carrying a promise unspoken in every step. Yet as they moved deeper into the wilderness, Evelyn felt the ground shift beneath not just her boots but her destiny, and she could not escape the sense that this meeting on the edge of life and death had bound them in ways neither of them yet understood, a bond forged in fire, water, and the snap of rope and whatever trials lay ahead. She knew one thing with absolute clarity. She would never forget the moment a cowboy leapt into her storm and whispered salvation into her soul.